Hey, how's everyone doing out there? I've done a few Zoom videos on servant leadership and have been sitting in on quite a few calls and been asked to present and was asked if I could do something that would capture it that could be saved and maybe in a presentation format. So I'm going to do that today and I'm going to post it and I'm going to leave it on my LinkedIn profile so you can access it. And again, it'll be quick. I've got to do this under 15 minutes on Prezi video, so there'll be very high level ideas. And if I can help in any way, reach out and I can give you more detail. I can share forms, I can share best practices. But I want to give you some of the anchors I've been able to put in place around servant leadership because you hear a lot about it. But what people struggle with is how do I operationalize it if I believe in it and I want the philosophy? So I'll do really quickly a high level of what it is from my perspective and what it isn't. And there is a ton of content online to go and find if you want to dig deeper. And then I'll share some very key anchors you can put in place in this short video. And if you want to reach out, by all means, I'm happy to help. You can find me on LinkedIn, it's the best spot. So, servant leadership, what is it? And more importantly, what it isn't. So, servant leadership, what it is and what it isn't. It is about service, it is about putting others first. It is about identifying a gap, a development gap in a potential employee or an existing employee, and closing that gap by putting yourself out there and serving them to close that gap. It is always looking in the mirror first, even when you're in a position of authority. So it is about serving others, hence servant leadership. It is not huggy huggy. It is not non measurable. It is not a risk. It is not without accountability. Servant leadership can have all those things, and it is not soft. It can be structured, and I'm going to try and share a little bit of that today. Some of these topics may not be foreign to you, but I challenge yourself to see if they all exist in your organization today. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to do those, I'm happy to help. If you're a leader and you want to get better at it in your world, in your department, on your team, I want to help you with that. And if you're an up and coming individual who at someday knows you want to lead and want to go down that path, I'm happy to share as well. And so I'm going to explain how you can do it, operationalize it, measure it. And then if you have any other questions, reach out to me. So again, I think we quickly covered what it is and isn't. It is service. It is good for business. It helps you grow a business, and it is not without its accountability. It doesn't mean it's huggy huggy, and it can absolutely be measured. So, one of the things I talk about in servant leadership is it's predominantly behavior based from my perspective and what I've observed in great servant leaders. We're always talking about how we do things, not the result. The result is measured and it needs to be there because that's your goal. But we spend a lot of time building tools to allow you to develop the behaviors to succeed. I'll give you an example in sports where I draw a lot of parallels. Did Nick Nurse sit back at the beginning of 2019 and say, go win an NBA championship and then leave the gym and never come back? No, they had a goal to win. Masai would have put in a plan to get the players needed and would have had a bunch of behavioral action items with his team to do to make that happen. And then Nick Nurse and his coaching staff would have had behaviors and structure, plays, skills, all things they were going to need to have in place to build a Raptors way of playing basketball. Nick Nurse didn't say, go win me a ring and leave and come back at the end of the year. Every day they went back to the gym and they worked on behaviors. Those behaviors were set at the beginning to hit their goal. They were also tweaked as the coaches observe those behaviors. Spend a little bit more time with this player. Hey, we're going to work on foul shooting with them. Hey, we're going to work on how they're setting screens. Hey, we're going to work with these guys on the two-man game. Hey, we're going to work with these guys on their three-point shots, whatever that looks like. Hey, we're going to work on the defensive sets. Those are all behaviors that happen in practice every day. Why would business be any different? So a servant leader gets in there, sees the gaps, takes ownership in developing them to help the person win, which helps the team win. So again, remember behaviors. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the anchors needed to identify those behavioral development gaps. And so how do you find out where someone needs some help or where they're strong? How do you get them to trust you and open up? So you can bring in your skills as a leader and resources and tools to close those gaps and help them grow. So before you do anything, it starts with being an active listener and it starts with connecting. And so I would strongly recommend whenever you have someone on your team, even if they exist today reporting to you, you can start again. But more ideally, when you start somewhere new or you get a new team member, have a connection meeting. A connection meeting before you start builds trust. I very uh, I come from a structured perspective with a connection meeting, and I ask questions that gets the individual to open up, so I better understand them, where they want to go, and how I can help. Normally looks a little bit like, tell me about your past, tell me how you got to our organization, tell me about what you do today, tell me about where you want to go, and tell me about life as much as you're willing to share. And I want those pieces of information so I can understand the skills they bring to the role. I want to hear from them where they think things can be better so I can help close those gaps. And then I want to find out where they want to go with their career so I can add more value as they do their job well and open up to me and help them get to that desired state. And then lastly, I want to know about them personally because I don't want to step on any sacred cows. I don't want to keep them too long at work on a Wednesday night when that's game night with the family. Or I don't want to get them coming in too early on a Friday morning if they're doing shinny with buddies on the ice Friday mornings at 7 a.m. And I want to be able to provide that flexibility, and I want to find out what that looks like from a company perspective, work perspective, their career, and their personal as much as they're willing to share. That sets a foundation for trust and allows a template for me to go back to when the relationship is off the wheels and validate if I've done something wrong. Then once that connection meeting has happened, it's really important that you have weekly one-on-ones. And some organizations very structured KPIs, behaviors below those. Some organizations they're more like, here's what I need from you this week, and the boss sits down and tells you everything you need to do. Some organizations they don't happen at all. A good structured one-on-one, from my perspective and what's worked for me over the years, is 5 simple categories. And yes, there are KPIs where applicable. But it starts with, tell me about last week. We haven't met in 7 days. What were your major accomplishments? What hurdles did you come across? Where can I help? How can I recognize or develop? And then the next major box becomes, what's on the go on the next 7 days? Where do you need resource, training, develop to be successful with your tasks? Or where do you need just someone to hear you out and see if you're going down the right road? The middle box in those 5 becomes very much about recognition and area of improvement. So if I've seen a behavior that you haven't mentioned that I believe is deficient, I'm going to document that and I'm going to give you support to close that gap and a plan to close that and review on a weekly basis. Conversely, if you've done something amazing, I want to make sure I recognize that because I'm going to use those weekly one-on-ones at review time. The 4th box becomes very much, hey, what do you need from me? What are your specific asks of me as your support person? And then the 5th box becomes, hey, my time as your leader, here's what I need out of you for the next week. And make sure we're on the same page, get clarity. And if you need any resources to hit those tasks or you can't prioritize them, I'm helping with you at that point. And then we summarize that one-on-one and off you go. And again, I'm doing all this in 15 minutes, so bear with me. Then as you're out there and you've done your connection meeting, you're doing your weekly one-on-ones. There's a thing called management by wandering around. It came out in the 80s, and I learned about it in the 2000s from a leader who I quite frankly thought they were making it up. And then I found out through the studies that it exists, and it's a very valuable behavior. And that's about as a leader getting out on the floor, seeing what's going on either in the manufacturing environment or the sales environment or the administrative on the back end. Perhaps it's sitting in on a back to school marketing campaign for a retailer, or getting on site to watch your construction team build houses. It's very applicable across multiple industries. And what you're doing on those is you want to do them on a regular basis, and you want to go with one agenda only, which is to listen and observe. So hear from your team what they need to be successful. See the gaps in your operating model. See where there's a lack of training and development. Take the opportunity to recognize great performance you see on site. I go back to the sports analogy. If a coach watched a game and during a timeout never spoke, what value would they add? So whether you're Nick Nurse, or you're Sheldon Keefe, I'll stay with Toronto, you are sitting there and you're watching the behaviors and you're live in the action and you're taking a moment to pause and coach. And management by wandering around will allow you to do that at the most senior levels. Yes, you have to lead from a desk. It's a big part of your responsibility to be accessible to the engine, but you have to get out in the field and observe. And now you can start to put observations into play for your strategic planning and for your one-on-ones on a weekly basis. And we'll get to strategic planning here at the end. Next, if you really want to grow an organization, you've got to grow your people. So are you investing in your people to allow your business to scale? So outside of the one-on-ones, do you sit down quarterly and build a development plan for your next in lines? Or even if they're not next in lines, you're individuals who are valuable players who just need more skill development to continue to develop. And a PDS looks very much like, hey, I want to go here. And the leader saying, okay, well, here's where I see the gaps. What do you think? Let's agree on the resources to put in to close those gaps to make you ready when that senior position becomes available. So I don't have to hire from the outside because you don't have the skill. You've already been learning it. Or it looks like, hey, the person just being great at what they do and that productivity increasing allows them the opportunity to grow their career, their compensation, and allows the organization to grow. So a very structured professional development strategy for your engaged players, and I'd be happy to share more detail. Again, up against a clock, a 15-minute clock here on Prezi Video. Performance reviews. Quickly, I find leaders who are afraid of performance reviews. It's because they don't have the content to write those reviews, or they can only write a review based on what they remember over the past few weeks. Or worse, leaders get an employee to write a self-evaluation, hand it in, and then the leader signs the self-evaluation, adds a comment or two. If you're doing those 52 weekly one-on-ones, and maybe it's less, and you're doing them with those 5 boxes, you've got all the content you need to write a valuable review and get full buy-in from your team members. So again, proper performance reviews are critical. The reason employees don't value them is if they write them themselves or they're so disconnected from their reality. So get them to write their self-evaluation, but don't look at it as a leader. Write your review based on your one-on-ones, then review the self-evaluation together, identify the gaps, if there are any, close those gaps through a development plan and understanding with the employee, and continue to move that great relationship forward. How does it all apply to a strategic plan? Well, twofold. One is when you're writing that plan, you want to engage your team. So yes, you want to set the organization's financial goals, usually over 5 years, and then you want to set your functional plan for a year, and you're doing your strategies, objectives, and tactics. But why not engage your departments and your teams on the front end to prepare, to put into those strategies for your executive team, and then on the back end to actually develop the SMART goals and the tactics so they're bought in and they're learning, and you're serving them through engaging them in process, and you're getting buy-in for the organization. What's your return on servant leadership investment, both personally and corporately? Well, one, you can put the head on your pillow knowing you're making people's lives better. You're allowing them the opportunity to grow and earn a better living, and you're giving them everything you can, and that's a great feeling. Corporately, it allows you to scale. The more leaders you can build because you're servant to them and you're closing those gaps, the quicker you can scale the business. Businesses that get to a certain size and can't scale, it's because that functional founder leader at the top can't make it flow through their leadership team because they haven't developed those leadership skills for them to develop in others. And servant leadership is a great path to go. Okay, I feel like I'm talking fast, and I know I am. Keep in mind, this is about 20 years of experience in what I do on a daily basis in 15 minutes. And again, those are just some of the anchors. How do I help? Why do I help and how can I help? Quite frankly, I've seen a lot of bad leaders out there who've been promoted into positions because they're very good at politics or they were good at their functional role. And I'm not saying those people have to go. I'm saying it's time for us to develop their skills so they can impact mental health of the people who report below them and want to grow within the organization. I think we can create change. It's why I help, and I do this for free. The more people I can influence, the better. Where can you find me? I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free, reach out. You'll probably see this posted there, but it's Mark Petitpas, MarkPetitpas. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help and dive deeper on any of these subjects. Thank you. I hope everyone's staying safe. Hopefully that was a good crash course on servant leadership, why and how.